You're listening to a Roddenberry Podcast.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. We'll have more news this evening, but first...
The latest Gene-ology, a Roddenberry Podcast.
Supplemental, Remembering Gene and Majel. Welcome to Mission Log Gene-ology. I'm Earl Green.
And I'm Ashley Thomas.
In each episode of Mission Log Gene-ology, we take a look back at Gene Roddenberry's earliest TV writing to see if the morals, meanings, and messages that made their way into his most famous later work, Star Trek, show up even earlier than we thought.
But this week, we're doing something just a little different. Instead of Earl and me looking back, we are going to hear from some folks who knew Gene and Majel Roddenberry personally.
What you're about to hear is the Remembering Gene and Majel panel from the 2026 TrekTalks telethon. If you're not familiar with TrekTalks, it is a Star Trek-powered fundraiser for the Hollywood Food Coalition, which works to end food insecurity in Southern California. Yours truly serves as the audio and technical producer for the show, and Ashley is part of the social media team for the telethon. More information about TrekTalks can be found at trektalks.net, and by the way, you can still make donations long after the telethon is over. They will gratefully accept that.
Absolutely. So get all the info for that, folks, at trektalks.net. Now, before we dig into our episode, you might be wondering, hey, where's Gene-ology been? We're on a hiatus at the moment. We are giving people time to catch up. We know that Gene-ology can be a bit intimidating due to the sheer amount of shows we cover, so we think of this like catching up on your favorite show during summer reruns, just like you did back in the pre-streaming era. But in the meantime, Patreon supporters will get to hang out with us a few different ways while we wait. We're planning to drop a few patron-only, all them, episodes while we're on hiatus. And of course, we're hanging out in the Mission Log Discord with our weekly Gene-ology After Dark chats at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific on Wednesdays. These chats are a bit informal, and they are a lot of fun. Think of it as a way not only to connect with us, but with your fellow Gene-ology fans. And we've got a really great group of folks that show up every single week, and we hope that you'll be a part of the fun there too.
Let me take a brief moment to encourage you to join our Patreon or follow us on YouTube or leave a review wherever you're listening to us. Patreon is your gateway to all things Mission Log, including exclusive access to the unedited version of our show and our private Discord where you can interact with us, your hosts, during those scheduled live chats, along with occasional screenings. You can access all this for just $1 a month. We're not going to be mad if you want to make it more. Head over to patreon.com/missionlog to see what tier works for you and join the conversation.
By the way, reviews really do help our shows way more than you could possibly imagine. Even if you can't come up with the words for a written review, a 5-star rating really does go a long way to tell the algorithm that you like us, you love us, you want more of us. You think other folks might like, love, and want more of us too. We are counting on our loyal genealogists to help spread the word. So please be sure to do that on wherever you're listening to us. And now, this week's trivia. Earl, I believe we do have just a tiny bit of trivia before we go into the Remembering Gene and Majel panel.
Just a smidge. Before we share the panel, we would like to make note of the folks who are on the panel. Remembering Gene and Majel brings to light stories of the power couple who brought us Star Trek, the man who created it, Gene Roddenberry, and the First Lady of Trek, Majel Barrett Roddenberry. Present for the panel is their son, Eugene Rod Roddenberry Jr., as well as 3 panelists. Fred Bronson is one of our panelists. He worked at NBC during the days of Star Trek the Animated Series, writing the episode The Counterclock Incident, credited as John Culver. He also co-wrote the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Menage a Trois, and has a story by credit on The Game. He also starred uncredited as Enterprise crew member in Star Trek The Motion Picture. We are also joined by Denise Crosby. Listeners of Gene-ology likely need no introduction to her, but in case you're not familiar with Denise, she played Lieutenant Natasha Yar on Star Trek The Next Generation. Denise has a great story about her connection with the Roddenberrys, which long precedes her time on Star Trek. Joining Fred and Denise is Ernie Over, who was Gene's driver and personal assistant. Ernie not only got to know the Roddenberrys in a professional sense, but he became a trusted friend and confidant to the family as well. Moderating our panel is Roddenberry Podcast's own host of Mission Log, John Champion. And now, on with the show.
Thank you so much for joining us all morning, and there is so much more great content to come today on the live stream. As you know, we are supporting Hollywood Food Coalition, so go to TrekTalks.net or go to givebutter.com/TrekTalks5 and donate, help support this incredible cause. It gives me no end of pleasure to welcome all these great special guests to talk about Gene and Majel. And we're just going to go around the room here really quickly so I can introduce everybody. Denise Crosby, who we all know from TNG. Denise, welcome.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Fred Bronson, who has worn many hats in the Star Trek world professionally. We're going to get into that. Welcome, Fred.
Thanks, John.
And Ernie Over, who started working for Gene as a personal assistant in 1987, stayed with the family for many years after that. We're going to get into your story as well. Welcome, Ernie. Glad to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
And Roddenberry, is it? Is that the yes? Okay.
Yes. R-O-T-T. I'm the other line of Roddenberries. R-O-T-T.
Roddenberries, yes.
There you go.
The famous wine. So glad that you're here. Now, listen, we were talking the other day, and you kind of asked me, well, what are we talking about? And I said, I just want to kick back and listen to great stories about your mother and father as people, what they were like to work with, what they were like to hang out with. And you said, good, because that's what I want to do too.
Yeah, no, I mean, having Ernie here, I haven't seen Ernie in, well over a decade, if not two, it feels like. I knew Ernie when I was a kid, essentially. And I knew Ernie, but, we never really went out to lunch and hung out. I never really said, hey, so, how's my dad? There wasn't that sort of connection. And Fred, I don't think I really knew at all. I met a couple times, but probably that's it. Denise, saw you on set when I was 14 or 13, 12, whatever the hell it was, running around, but never really connected. I've had the privilege of hanging out with you a bit at conventions and things now and starting to get to know you. But these are people who had their own and their own relationships and lives with my father and knowledge of him. And I've always thought I was so privileged to be able to run into people later in life who knew my father from certain points of view and say, wow, can you, let's talk. We talk about other things too, but let's talk about that as well. And now you've got people here who I think can share about the man. And my journey is always to learn about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah. It's not about that today, but I want, the sort of who was he to you? Who was the man behind the great bird of the galaxy? And I'm always interested in that sort of side of things.
And by the way, just up front, if anybody is wondering, we did have Will Wheaton scheduled. There was a conflict, miscommunication. He is actually at the No Kings protest, so we won't have Will today, but certainly plenty of stories to tell in the time that we have together. Now, Rod, I do want to go back a little bit, though, because, yes, you love to hear these stories. You made a great documentary some years ago called Trek Nation that was about exactly that, trying to uncover the person who was your father as opposed to kind of the TV legend, creator, writer, producer. And I'm just curious to get things kind of kicked off here. What were the biggest surprises or revelations for you in that process? Because you went out and interviewed a lot of people. How did that maybe reshape your take on your understanding of your father?
Just because we don't have that much time, there were so many amazing stories from so many points of view, and I was really trying to get, the people who loved him and everything in between. And, some people wouldn't speak. For example, Harlan Ellison, I reached out to him, and I would love to hear, from his point of view. But of course, he wasn't fond of necessarily being on camera and sharing that sort of thing. So that didn't happen. But again, I got to humanize my father. I got to learn about him from a different point of view, not from the son point of view, but from other points of view and humanizing him with all his strengths and weaknesses. He was a flawed human being. He still came up with the initial concept of Star Trek and then put incredible people on the show to make it what it is today. And I was able to love him again because he was no longer on the pedestal. He was no longer just the great bird of the galaxy. He was this, as stupid as it is to say out loud, this flawed but incredible, forward-thinking man who, with all his strengths and weaknesses, was someone I could connect with. And that was the journey of Trek Nation for me.
Well, I want to kick it over to Fred because, Fred, you have this really interesting story as a young man, 18, 19 years old, getting the dream invitation to go visit the set of Star Trek, the original series, in its final production year, and get to know Gene and Majel a little bit. And then, of course, that led to your later professional association. Tell us that story about dropping down on the stage at Paramount as Star Trek is wrapping up.
Well, it literally was wrapping up. It was Turnabout Intruders, so it was the very last episode. And how I found that out was being on the set that day. So a friend of mine that I went to high school with, her name was Jackie, and she went to the set. And she said, hey, I called the office. Anybody could do it. You don't need to be a celebrity or a VIP. I called, got an appointment, December 31st, 1968, 4 p.m. Come to the office. You can bring a friend. I was 19. I had a 14-year-old friend named Mark Zickery, who went on to write Star Trek First Contact episode, Next Generation. Not the movie, the TV episode. I said, Mark, your Christmas present is we're going to the set of Star Trek. So we get to the office, we're walked over, and the guy says, it's 4 o'clock, stay about a half hour, and then leave, and he took off. So they were filming in sick bay. And at one point, I guess people were being a little rowdy, and someone who I realized later was an AD said, come on, people, last episode of the season, let's get this together. Let's get this done. And at that point, Majel walked by me. Now, we had not met yet. She didn't know me. I didn't know her, but I knew who she was, of course. And under her breath, she said, last episode, period. And in my head, I went, no, because the cancellation had not been announced. But I knew that Gene and Majel were together, and I thought, if she's saying it, it's got to be true. So I didn't really get to know her that day, but that was our first encounter. My first encounter with Gene was 2 years earlier. Season 1, I was 17. Star Trek had just gone on the air. At the same time, I entered college, started writing for my college paper, and said to the entertainment editor, I want to interview Gene Roddenberry. She said, if you can get an interview, we'll run it. I got the interview, went over to his office in Paramount. I was sitting outside the office and waiting to go in, and this jackhammer went off. And I thought, what is that? And I realized, and I'm not joking, it was my heart pounding, that I was about to go in and meet Gene Roddenberry in his office. He gave me a great interview. The lead was Gene Roddenberry says that the purpose of television is to sell toothpaste. And we went from there. But that was not the beginning of a friendship in either case. And if you like, I can elaborate on that.
Well, I think we'll come back to that because, like I said earlier, you wore many hats and you worked in many capacities and around a lot of people in sort of the world that orbited Gene and Majel. But I want to jump over to Denise really quickly because Denise, I love when Fred talked about going into the set of the original series, and that it must have been kind of mind blowing, certainly for a 19-year-old kid seeing a show being put together like that. My thought was, okay, well, what did you walk out of there with? because they're shutting down. Production's over. It is done. Denise, you had your own encounters, obviously, on the first season and beyond of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Can you tell us a little bit about that? These initial moments, getting to know this world that Gene had created. Because when we talked on the Trek Files on Larry Nemechek's show, we talked a little bit about how Gene sort of remolded this character to fit you, really shaped Tasha Yar to fit what you brought to the table. So take us back a little bit to those early days of getting that gig and getting to know Gene a bit in the process.
Well, I mean, I need to start before
Great. You start wherever you like.
I met Majel, actually, before I met Gene. And it's just, it's such a delightful story. Right before I was cast in The Next Generation, I was doing a play in Los Angeles called Tamara. And it was a hugely successful production. It was unique in that you followed the actors room to room through this Italian villa that was the American Legionnaires building, historical building on Highland just by the Hollywood Bowl, was turned into this Italian villa. And the play was extraordinary. It ran for years. And it's a story about Tamara de Lempicka, the famous Polish painter in the 1920s. And you're transported to fascist Italy, 1927. And it was huge. And I was playing Tamara de Lempicka in the play. And so we would do 8 shows a week, like a typical Broadway show. And I mean, thank God I was in my 20s because I was dead. By Sunday, we were dead. But we started a little ritual where between the Sunday matinee and the last evening's performance of the week, Sunday night, a group of us would go to this really famous restaurant on Sunset called the Cock and Bull. It was called the Cock and Bull, right?
Yep.
It was a celebrity haunt. It was very chic. My mother and father met there in real life at the Cock and Bull restaurant. So our ritual was we'd get a dozen oysters and a Bloody Mary for a little, liquid inspiration to go back and, finish the final show. So a couple of us girls, we'd sit at the bar, we'd get our oysters. And every Sunday, so this was about, 5 o'clock, we started to see this very elegant woman at the same time on Sunday doing the same thing, eating oysters. And so after a couple of weeks of this, we started to, befriend each other and talk and share what we were doing. And she introduced herself as Majel Roddenberry. And I said, Roddenberry, are you related to Gene Roddenberry? And she said, yes, that's my husband. I went, holy, really? Oh my God. Well, that's incredible. That's, everyone loves Star Trek. And of course, there was no Next Generation yet. And so cut to, 6 months later, and I'm going through the auditioning process of, Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I always, eventually, when Majel came to the set, we reconnected, and I reminded her of, those great Sundays at the Cock and Bull that we would all share. So it was almost like it almost felt like a premonition in some way, like something was happening, in that way. So now we come to the Next Gen. Yes, and the role that the original description of Tasha Yar is quite different. It's, Masha Hernandez. And, I don't know, Masha Hernandez, not going to be me. So I was originally reading for the part of Deanna Troi, and that went a couple rounds. And finally, I get far enough along in the process. I mean, this is after maybe 3 auditions, and I get to Paramount, and I go in. Still, it's Masha Hernandez, but we'll change that. And but I'm still reading for Deanna Troy, and Gene, right there in the office, said, "You know what? Would you do me a favor? Would you take the sides for Masha Hernandez and go look at them and come back and read that part?" And you go, "Sure, of course, I'll do whatever you want me to do." And that's how it flipped. He just flipped Marina and I right then and there. And then the evolution of the character begins. Obviously, we're going to make her, kind of a, obviously different background, and I think he just loved the way I looked. That I had that short hair, and it took everyone by surprise. This is the 80s. Girls weren't, looking like that, so to speak. And that's the boldness of Gene. He's the visionary that he is. He could see beyond what some people, couldn't see right in front of them. He thought this could be really interesting and magical.
Well, I kind of love the producer's privilege there to say, no, you know what? I want to change this character entirely because I can.
That's right.
And
that's right. I wish, in fact, more people did that.
Yeah.
Or felt they could do that. Because, sure. That's all that's in the process when it should be allowed. When you're creating this from the ground up, you have the freedom to do that.
There's too many damn executives now, and I know I'm one of them. So, but there are.
Well,
really
and Denise, I'm kind of shocked you didn't use the perfect entry point in your meeting with Gene, which is, Gene, your wife and I, we have cocktails every Sunday afternoon. Let's talk Trek.
I know. I was saving that one. Right. Save that one till I secured the role.
There you go. Well, let's jump over to Ernie. Now, Ernie, as Denise is coming into the show in those early stages of TNG, you found yourself working for Gene. So give us maybe a little bit of that executive office perspective. What brought you into the show at that time, and what was your first encounter with Gene like?
Well, actually, I was right into the show thanks to Fred Bronson.
Hey, look at that.
Yeah. When Gene was wanting to have a driver, I had done a favor for Fred earlier in the year, driving a friend of his around in a Rolls Royce. And he was asked, do you know anybody who drives a Rolls Royce? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. And that's how I got my introduction. And I didn't know that I was actually going to be hired by Gene until a month or so later when he called me over to the house and brought me in and introduced me to Majel as his new driver. And that was the first time I'd heard that news. And I was, oh, really? Oh, this is really great. But that's what I did. I drove Gene to and from the studio. We went down to La Costa where his second house was. I did a lot of errands, and I had a little apartment in the house. It was a little chauffeur's apartment off the garage, and I would stay there once in a while, not a lot. But Gene always loved the fact that I got to work early every day. What I didn't tell him is I lived in West Hollywood. If you don't leave at 10 minutes before 7, you're not going to get there until 8:30 because there's only Wilshire and Sunset that go through Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
So I always left early, got there early, and I always stayed late, for the traffic to go away. But one of the things I don't think people knew much about Majel is she was a heck of a cook. She really ruled the kitchen. Nice. And I would stay for dinner most nights, and she would just go out of her way to make the dinners really delicious. And after Gene passed, I worked for her as a personal assistant, and I had to set up all of the convention dates and speaking engagements for her. And she was adamant that she had vegetarian meals at the hotel and on the airplane, where I had to set that up. But what people didn't know is that she always had a bag of beef jerky in her purse. She would tell me, I don't eat anything that doesn't eat grass. But it was a great 8 years between Gene and Majel. I would take Gene out to lunch every day. Sometimes we'd stop at a real fancy French restaurant down the street. And other times we'd go to Taco Bell. He relished food. And it didn't make any difference. If it was the creme brulee or if it was a Taco Bravo. It was just, he loved food.
Well, I just quickly want to say that Ernie, is presenting himself as a driver. But, I saw Ernie, even though I was a kid, I wasn't completely oblivious. And he was much more than that to my father. I can't say what, because, they had their friendship. But, it was a real friendship. And I think there was a lot of respect and trust. And I know that my father looked to you as a confidant, someone that he could trust in anything. You were there. You were his right hand for so many things, personal and business and all that. So I just there was no seeing my father in that era without Ernie. Ernie was his right hand, always there. So I thank Ernie for being that for my father, because I think, as we all know in this industry, and of course any other industry, finding people that you can really trust and lean into, it can be very hard to do and rare. And so Ernie, I have a tremendous amount of admiration and respect for you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, one of the fun things that I got to do with Gene, we would be invited to National Space Society events, and we would have astronauts and NASA administrators at the house and things like that. And I had to know who was coming beforehand, because Gene at that time was in a wheelchair. And if there was someone walking towards Gene, I would have to know who it is. And I would have to lean back and say, it's Dan Golden, NASA administrator. And so when he got to the chair, Gene would say, Dan, good to see you, And it was that kind of thing. I was just supporting him, His memory was not as great as it once was. And it was my thrill. Probably the biggest thrill we had was at an event when Lech Walesa, the president of Poland, was visiting Los Angeles. And we had a private meeting with him. And Gene studied Polish to say in Polish, welcome, Mr. President, to Los Angeles. And he practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. And he got to say that to Lech Walesa. And that was pretty cool, because you don't get to meet the president of another country very often. And that was pretty cool. Yeah, he did a great job.
I'm hearing you describe that. I need somebody to offer me that kind of help now. Like, here's who you're talking to. That would be incredibly helpful. And I love this image. I didn't know that he got carted around in this chauffeur-driven Rolls Royce. It's such a wonderfully decadent 80s TV producer image. Rod, did you ever ride in this car? And were you allowed to touch anything in that car?
A quick story. They forced me to drive him to dinner once. He forced me to drive him to dinner once, and I was scared shitless. The roles. My father, I remember when I was a kid, he had a Cadillac. And then at one point, I can't remember if it was the car right before the Rolls, but because I loved Smokey and the Bandit, I loved the Firebird Trans Am. My father, and this was early 80s, got a Pontiac Trans Am, white one, not black, but he got one. He leased one for, I think, about 3 years. And that was his car before he went to a Rolls Royce. And I know the Rolls Royce was sort of it was Next Generation had just started to become successful a bit. And as he was getting older, he decided to sort of splurge on that. But he definitely wasn't the kind of guy, and Ernie, you could speak better to this, that had the pompous thing. In fact, I believe there's a joke about Grey Poupon.
Oh, there is. Yeah. It was a Christmas party at the studio, and everyone was bringing Gene a gift. Well, what do you get a guy that's, can get anything he wants? And so when he got my gift, it was a little paper bag, and I wrote Gene on the outside of it, and he lifted it up and looked at it and said, "What is this?" I said, "Open it." So he did, and he pulled out a jar of gray poupon mustard. And he looks at me, and I went, "For the car." And so whenever he had someone from the studio he was taking out to lunch, he'd ask me some inane thing, and I say, "I think it's in the glove box." And I'd open up the glove box, and there's this jar of gray poupon there. And the guest would always said, "You have gray poupon." And Gene would always say, "But of course." It was one of the fun little things we did in the car.
Amazing.
For the younger audience, they're going to have to go look up the Grey Poupon with the Rolls-Royce commercials, because that's the reference.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Really, yeah, but like if you're over 45, that kills. So,
Really.
yeah. Great. So look, food has become a theme here. Are we talking about Grey Poupon? Ernie, you mentioned that Majel was an outstanding cook. When we had Raina on the Trek File, she talked about how laborious it was, that everything in that kitchen was made from scratch. That Majel wanted to make sure that she had a hand in everything. I have heard tales about just some absolutely legendary parties at the Roddenberry household. So, Denise, I want to come back to you because I know that there were certainly a few during the Next Gen era. Any memories about going to the Roddenberry home for events, holidays, gatherings?
There were plenty of rumors. That by the time we were all assembled, this 25 years later, there were the legendary rumors of the original cast parties. So I, being a young starlet in Hollywood, I went, I don't know. I'm just gonna pass on this one. So unfortunately, I went to like a number of studio
Sure.
I remember Gene had a Christmas party one time at a beautiful like mansion in Larchmont area, and that was exquisite and really fun, and stuff like that. But no, I didn't. I missed the pool parties.
Look, professionally, probably very wise.
We could do them again. I mean, we could bring them back. I'm not saying now I'm older and wiser, and I think I could handle it.
Right. No. Fred, let me come back to you because you said that there are some other gaps you wanted to fill in there after that original visit, and kind of reintroduced to Gene and Majel's Orbit animated series and beyond. Yeah.
Right. About 3 years after I marched on NBC to protest, keep Star Trek on the air, I was hired in it. Yes, of course. Yeah. Thanks to Bijo and John Trimble. Yes. I was hired as a publicist. And they knew my love of Star Trek. And so when the animated series was coming on the air, I was the publicist. I treated it like the second coming of Star Trek, which it was. Sure. But I treated it like a primetime show. And Gene did a lot of interviews that I set for him. I remember one at the Polo Lounge, wherever a reporter wanted to eat. And that's really... I had worked with Gene on Questor. I was the publicist for the pilot that was filmed with Questor. And that's where we started a friendship. It developed during Next Generation. And then it just became lunches and dinners. And when we were doing the animated series, I came up with the idea of producing a T-shirt for the press with Star Trek Lives with the animated Enterprise and on the back on NBC Saturday mornings. Right. And Majel said, I want to make some for Lincoln Enterprises. So we went down to the garment district. We picked out T-shirts. Mine were in blue, hers were in white. And so we had a little adventure together producing these very valuable T-shirts now, because I think there were only like 100 made of the blue ones. So if you have one, they're very rare. During the animated series, Rod was born. And I went up to the house with an NBC photographer and got the first pictures of Gene and Majel cradling you, Rob, in their arms. Mm-hmm. Every paper in the country ran it. Wow. It really got widespread distribution. And Rob, the second time we were together was when Gene got an award in 1991. Ernie, you were there. The Humanist Society in Chicago. You were there. Majel was there. And after the dinner, Gene said, take Rod around the city, entertain him. And I think he slipped me $100 or something to pay a taxi driver. And we drove around. We took you to a McDonald's that's like a 1950s McDonald's. Nice. And at some point, you jumped out of the car and said, okay, I'm fine now. I'm on my own. I'll see you later.
Folks, we're at the end of our panel. I want to do this again next year with all of you because there is more to be told, certain about the humanist angle and about Rod going to McDonald's. So thank you all. What wonderful stories. I appreciate it. Everybody who is watching, there is still time to donate now and even after this broadcast at givebutter.com/.
And don't forget the matching donation.
Yes. Rod generously gave us a $31,000 match challenge. So please, any bit that you donate will get matched up to that point. It is always a good time to give to the Hollywood Food Coalition. Thank you all so much. Thank you, everybody who watched today. And let's do it again, okay?
You got
Great.
it.
Cheers,
Thank
everybody.
you, John.
Nice seeing you guys.
Bye.
Oh, yeah, I got to do this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Special thanks to the whole Trek Talks organization and to the guests of today's panel. Gene-ology is meant to be entertaining and informative, but it's also just the beginning of an ongoing conversation about the works of Gene Roddenberry. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Facebook at missionlogpod. And please remember, your comments could be used on future installments of Gene-ology. If you have any material that might be of interest to us that isn't already in the Roddenberry archive, drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and Mission Log Gene-ology is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment.
Special thanks to consulting producers Matt Esposito, Tom Kozak, Mike Richards, Mike Schabel, and Paul Shattuck.
Back next week with more of your favorite programs. This concludes our broadcast day.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.